What was the most memorable workplace meltdown you ever witnessed? I have a good one. I worked at Target a long time ago, and as a cashier, I usually took the express lanes. The express lanes were extremely annoying to work in. It was like a magnet for trouble. Everyone broke the 15 items or less rule, and I'm not talking like a couple. They brought full carts to the lane, and at Target, you aren't allowed to say anything about it. You just finish the checkout and move on. And of course, you would get sighs from people who thought you weren't moving quick enough. So it was a bit annoying working in the express lane. Well, that brings me to Suzette. She was a regular. Every single day, she would buy multiple pairs of shoes and a full cart of groceries, going past the 15 items or less rule by like 30 to 40 items in the middle of the day, clogging up my whole lane. But I dealt with her. She liked to chat and had this ridiculously annoying laugh. She would say something that was not a joke, it was just a statement, and laugh like she was at a comedy show. My grandma likes to call Target spend over 100 store, like that was a real bellyacre lady. She would also flirt with me and she was very upfront. What are you carrying? Them khakis ain't doing much for the eyes, but I know you got something hiding. I can tell from the broad shoulders you got a secret too big to keep to yourself. Oh, my favorite bagger is here today. And so on, followed by extreme laughter again. I still just dealt with her and got her out as quickly as possible. The real kicker was that she returned everything. All the shoes and clothes she ended up coming back to, but moving on. This day, I was assigned a different lane and I had just shut my light off to clean up and restock my mini shelf. My coworker, Nick, was working at express lanes. I heard the familiar laughs and I heard her say my name and ask about me. Then she began to flirt with him and she had her boy bring an extra cart along. 2 full carts and a ton of shoes. Nick lost his cool. He threw the shoes and boxes on the floor and all over the place. He pushed over the mini rack and started cussing her out, like big time. He yelled at her so much that she started saying mean things, saying she was going to get her cousins to come back and her husband to come back. He pulled off his shirt and walked to the employee lounge, still spouting off the whole way there, shirtless, where, after a small delay of her getting her shoes for free and Nick being in the detention room, he was fired. What's really funny about all this is that Nick was a short dude and he didn't seem the type to flip, but he yanked off that shirt and he was shredded. He had the full muscle set. Well, there's something I didn't know today. Regardless if I have 15 or more items, cashiers cannot say anything if I'm in that express lane. Unless, of course, they're a short king, then they're probably going to bust off their shirt and walk off too. But I'm pretty sure that's not going to happen at my Target. Story 2. Not the biggest meltdown, but some sweet justice. I did my undergraduate thesis in an incredibly competitive research lab. There was another student doing the same thing as I was under one of the other postdocs. Let's call her D. D was a huge witch to me. Thankfully, we didn't have to work together much, but when we did, she found every way she could to put me down, be condescending, and brag about how great she was. Now that I'm looking back, it was probably jealousy. I was far more involved in the project I was working on, which meant way more hands-on time and ultimately more experience. At the same time, I just thought my supervisor was a slave driver while hers was way nicer, so I couldn't fathom why she was being such a jerk all the time. Anyway, at the end of the year long term, we have to present our findings in front of the lab, which is composed of about a dozen professional researchers and technicians. Now, normally, in a presentation in an upper-level class, you might be able to throw up some careless reasoning for your rationale and some cutesy, maybe there's a correlation here graphs and get a pretty good mark for it. So D gets up in front of everybody and makes one of those presentations, super flimsy justifications for the structure of her experiment, measures, etc., and she even used some super obscure method of analysis to make it look like there were statistically significant results from her experiment. In another lab, that might have flown, but not here. These people were professionals and they expected real science. They politely listened throughout the whole cringe-inducing presentation, and then as soon as the Q&A opened up, my supervisor turned to D's and asked, "So you're teaching your students to lie about their data?" And the whole room erupted into a massive argument. It was the sweetest justice, watching D get slammed by question after question from these people, almost as sweet as getting up for my own presentation 10 minutes later and knocking it out of the park. I went on to publish my findings. So satisfying. Story 3. I worked with a sales rep who was about to get fired for faking his expense reports. He knew it was going to happen because corporate called the restaurant where he was pulling his scam from and they did some research, found it all out, and got the law involved. He took his company car, a Saab 9000 CD, and left it in the worst part of town with the keys in it, hoping it would get stolen. Pure spite on his part. Unfortunately, he didn't plan for how he was going to get it out of this part of town, so he got mugged. The ambulance came and took him to the ER. I should add here that he was about 25 or so and a complete jerk. The interesting part, he tried to go out on work comp due to his injuries and stayed away from the office because he knew he was going to get fired. I had to visit him at his home and explain that he was going to get fired and that he could keep the law out of this if he paid the money back. It was $2,500. He said he was on pain pills due to his injuries and couldn't understand what I was saying. He stays at home for 2 weeks, recovering from his injuries. Now here's the meltdown. After the doctor releases him, he comes back to work. The day he comes back, the legal team and the police are waiting for him. He gets formally fired and the police arrest him. I should add that the whole thing was being recorded by the legal team on video. After they put the cuffs on him, he immediately drops to the ground, screaming that he is injured, in severe pain, and doesn't deserve to be treated like this. The police grab him and throw him in the back of the police car while he's screaming like a baby the whole time. What he didn't know was that there was a video camera in the police car. Once the police put him in the back of the car and then went back inside, leaving him alone in the car, he stopped crying and started laughing. This dragged on for years. My firm refused to back down and we prosecuted him for everything we could. Story 4. My own. I worked as a pharmacy technician on night shifts. It was the only 24-hour pharmacy close to a hospital with a staggeringly busy ER room. Perk was handed out like candy. Well, we had this one repeat offender who was everything wrong with the system. She doctor shopped, screamed the walls down if she didn't get what she wanted, and called us every name under the sun. Management didn't care because it was business as usual, and furthermore, when you get into working night shifts at a pharmacy in a city, you kind of start to understand the element. I had an exceptional level of patience until one day she just got under my skin. Her copay was 50 cents. She screamed at me because her copay was usually zero, not true, and because she couldn't afford it. She had just bought cigs at the front counter, by the way. She got in my face and screamed that I was trying to hurt her and that she wouldn't be able to take care of her son. She then turned to him and pointed at me, saying I was a terrible woman who was ending mommy. I lost it. I don't know why this moment did it, but it did. I slammed my hands down on the counter, came from behind the register, and got face to face with her, telling her she needed to leave before I called the cops because I was sick of her crap. She squared up with me, nose to nose, but when she saw I wasn't backing down, she stepped back and then proceeded to ask me to pay the 50 cents for her copay. She told me I could afford it. My coworker saw what was going on and pushed me to the back room to chill out. I don't know how that situation ended because I was in the back room blowing off steam, but the next time the lady came back, she refused to be helped by me, which was probably the best. I'm not proud of my ridiculous behavior, and I can't defend myself for that, but man, I'd never felt anger like that ever before. Story 5. I was shopping at a Stop and Shop one day about 10 years ago, picking up some odds and ends before going home, when I overheard some guy getting torn down by his manager. He was in the process of cleaning up a broken jar of jam or something, and his manager was just totally ripping into him. Do you know how long this mess has been here? Why does it seem like I'm always leading you around like a dog just to get you to work? Do you know how many people would love to have your job? The worker was a skinny dude, maybe 17 or 18, and was sort of just gritting his teeth and keeping them cool despite the barrage of insults. After he gets things cleaned up, he pushes the mop bucket away down the aisle, and the manager walks off. I go to the aisle to get some peanut butter, and I just see him stop in his tracks and take a deep, shuddering breath. His hands clench and unclench, and he walks on. I continue shopping, and he disappears. After 10 minutes later, as I'm checking out, I once again see this manager publicly tear into the same guy for not being upfront and begging for customers. Despite repeated calls, he's doing the best he can while under this duress, but eventually lets the "I'm doing the best I can" man out under his breath. This seems to incense the manager, who goes on about how his best isn't good enough, and now he's not representing the Stop and Shop brand. Kid finally just stops working and stares at the manager for a moment before, arms shuddering with rage, grabbing at his shirt. With a rage-filled yell that silences the checkout area, he rips the shirt off his chest like Hulk Hogan, throws it into his manager's face, then calmly walks out of the store. Everyone's just shocked, and the manager walks away speechless with the remains of the shirt. The silence is pierced by someone on the intercom saying, "Clean up aisle 7 and once more items are checked out." Don't miss out on future episodes filled with epic workplace meltdowns just like that last one. You gotta admit, you could put yourself in the place of that poor teenage worker. Now please do tap that like button and subscribe to my channel for more regular doses of drama, good or bad. It's always good to listen to. Let's go ahead and move on to the next story. This is story 6. Probably mine. I was doing car sales at 19 and I was pretty successful at it. I was on pace to clear $100,000 that year, about 4 months in. Anyway, we got our checks on time, and as I checked over my commission check, I noticed it was short. I grabbed my file and confirmed that there were 3 cars missing on the list of cars I was paid commission on. I calmly went to my sales manager and explained everything. He suggested I go to the accounting department with all my paperwork and explain it to them, so I did. When I was done there, they said I had to go to the president's office and show him, so I did. When I was done with him, he sent me back to the sales manager. Even though I told him I'd already shown him, he sent me to accounting and she sent me to you, so back I went. I told him what had happened and he told me he couldn't help me and that it was the accounting department that made the checks. So I went back there and she said if it was a mistake they made, I had to get it approved by the president who was unwilling to help. So I went to my desk, trying to calm down. I was hot. And my manager came over and asked me to help someone who was aimlessly wandering on the lot. I clicked. I asked him, "Why would I try to sell more of your vehicles when you won't pay me for the ones I did sell?" He looked shocked and started to yell at me how it wasn't his fault, and I needed to do what he said, so I went ballistic. I told him to get out of my way while I gathered up my stuff and took it to my car as he pleaded with me not to quit. I told him he should expect me to come back and shoot up all the windows if I didn't get my check of what they owed me in the mail. I left, peeling out. It was a huge scene, but it was over 20 years ago, and I'm condensing it. I got home and called the labor board immediately. They sent me a packet of papers to fill out, and I did as soon as I got them. I made copies of all my paperwork, proving they owed me about $1,800 or so, and got them in the mail. Within a week, I had a check in my mailbox from the dealer. I did not go shoot out their windows. I probably should have, though. I'm guessing they were trying to pull one over on me since I was 19 and green to sell cars. Story 7. I was in 5th grade and we had this social studies teacher who was strangely resemblant of Colonel Sanders named Dr. King. He was high-strung, a little overly touchy physically and emotionally, and he loved his map of the world. It was one of those maps that required a string to be pulled down in order to reveal it. Now, Dr. King wouldn't let anyone but him pull it down. One of my friends named Oren was a bit of a bad seed. He'd consistently get into trouble because he was kind of a mischievous little kid. One day we were in social studies and Dr. King was about to use his precious prize map of the world for his lesson. We were all being airheads on this day, and all the while Dr. King was desperately trying to maintain composure. Oren, gassed up at the attention of his friends, volunteers to help Dr. King pull the map down. In a moment of tenderness and foolishness, Dr. King agreed to let Oren open up the map. Oren, so ecstatic that of all the kids, he was the one allowed to do this, runs up to the map string and clutches it. He then pulls it down with the force of a tank and the map tears in half. Dr. King goes completely white with anger. He starts babbling and repeating one phrase over and over. "Why would you do this? Why would you do this? Why would you do this?" He can't even reprimand Oren properly. He's just stuck in a loop at this point. The next day, Dr. King did not show up for class, and that continued through the rest of the entire semester. Oren broke Dr. King. Story 8. 2008. What a wonderful year. I was working for a large, well-known company that happened to have a high-risk mortgage bank in their portfolio. Needless to say, they made the decision to lay off over 700 employees. So they schedule it for Tuesday and notify all the managers that would have to lay someone off. I don't know why big corps like laying off on a Tuesday seems to be a trend. So Tuesday rolls up and they begin laying off around 9 a.m. By 9:30 a.m., they stop the layoffs. On 3 separate floors, they simultaneously laid off people with over 30 years of experience. They all flipped. I watched one storm out of the little meeting room they were in with their manager trying to grab them on the way out. He proceeded to just randomly grab anything he could and throw it. No targets, just grab and chuck. Monitors, laptops, phones, and chairs. Yes, just like those videos you see. Eventually, one of his friends tackled him and he was escorted out via the stairs from the 14th floor. The next day, I'm walking into the building and there are half a dozen police officers behind the security gate just hanging out. When I got to the 14th floor, there was another one outside the elevators. They came to find out they had them on each floor where layoffs were going to occur. It makes it worse, they had to call some of the layoffs back as people quit on the spot when they saw the heavy police presence and they freaked out. Story 9. There was a guy I used to work with. He was the most boring, straight-laced guy you could ever meet. He was very into entomology and environmental presentation. He used to do things like count the crayfish in a patch of creek at the weekend. He spoke very quietly, and I often couldn't hear him even when I sat right next to him. We worked in a call center, and he was renowned as one of the best agents you could get calling through. He was so patient and gentle with even the dumbest of customers. It was hard on him, though. He was the kind of guy who flushes really obviously when he gets pissed off. You could sit next to him, watch him quietly seethe as he gently said, "Yes, ma'am, now if you could just click the text under the sign-in button that says, 'Forgot your details.'" Then one afternoon, he just couldn't hack it anymore. I have no idea what it was that got to him. This woman must have said something, though, because he just screamed "F off" down the phone line and threw his headset across his desk. Then he picked up his office chair, kind of rammed it into the wall, and marched out of the room. 10 minutes later, he came back, quietly apologized to the manager, and carried on as if nothing had happened. Story 10. At my old store, we had a high schooler employed as a cashier because her dad worked as the deli assistant manager. Everything was fine. She was a little bratty and wouldn't listen to me or any of the other service leads, but she did her job all right. Her dad got caught selling substances in the parking lot and was arrested, and she was promptly put under investigation too. Eventually, they found out that she had been stealing from her register and she was arrested during one of my shifts. I watched as they told her why she was being arrested, that charges were being pressed, and that she was officially fired. She tries to resist arrest, falls to the ground, begins to go crazy on the floor while tearing at her uniform. They managed to get her hands behind her back after she'd gotten her shirt off. Once she's in cuffs, she begins to shout that she's going to sue everyone because they're looking at her body and she's young. And don't they know who she is and she knows people who will mess us all up? They put her in the back of the cop car and she's thrashed around trying to escape, banging on the divider and trying to get her hands on the cops. I'm not sure what happened to her after they drove away. Story 11. I wasn't the one that got fired, but I watched it happen. I was at Publix getting a sub when I heard this. Manager: "What the hell are you doing? You know I have to fire you for doing this again?" Worker: "What's the problem? I didn't do anything wrong." Manager: "You are allowed to get something to eat on your break, not eat while you're packing food." Worker: "So I had a couple chicken wings. It's not that big of a deal." Manager: "There are 50 wings in the bottom of that trash can." Nothing else was said and the manager escorted the wing eater out. The guy was making baskets of wings and was basically going one for the basket, one for me, and eating his way through the batch of wings. The best part was that the two people making subs just started laughing and one went, "If the manager knew how much that guy has eaten in the 2 weeks he has worked here, he would crap a brick. The other day, he just sat there eating a whole container of potato salad while he was working the fryer." Okay, can I just say, that's a pretty sweet job to have, to be able to eat all that much and still not get caught for it for, 2 weeks? Yum. All right, I hope you enjoyed hearing about these unforgettable workplace meltdowns. If you want more to come your way, please do make sure to catch our next video. Who is the most hated person in your workplace and why? Story 2 is simply scandalous. It's spicy. I'll see you there. Thank you for watching this one.